The views and opinions of the following show do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of News Talk 1450 WOL, Radio 1 Incorporated, or their management.
Welcome to Beyond Just Talk. This is a positive, inspirational, and thought-provoking program that discusses life and business topics from a solution-oriented perspective with your host, S.L. Young.
All right, welcome. It's another great day. We're ready to discuss subjects that will make a difference in your day. This is the place that people connect, ideas are shared, and lives are enriched. My name is Stacey Young. My author's name is S.L. Young, but please call me Sly. Before we get started today, next week my guest is a woman who is helping individuals and organizations understand the importance of behavior and compliance. For this week, we'll recap last week's show, have a discussion with my guest, Dr. J. Phillip London, who is the executive chairman and chairman of the board of CACI International Incorporated and the author of Character, the Ultimate Success Factor. We'll preview next week's guest as well. On last week's show, my special guest was Joy Rowley, the founder and president of Joy Life Coaching. She is the life coach who helps individuals to deal with life challenges or transitions. Also, she's an advocate against distracted driving. In May 2011, Mrs. Rowley's 19-year-old son, Kyle, completed his freshman year of college and started a summer job. He was on his way home after work, but didn't make it because his car stalled in the middle of the road. While pushing his car off the roadway, he was struck and killed by a distracted driver. This tragic experience drove Miss Rowley to action. Since this fateful day, she became a life coach in addition to her training business. She told us that it took a while to change the minds and cultures related to smoking in buildings or bars, and also allowing children to be in cars without car seats. Now, according to Mrs. Rowley, the same types of behavioral changes need to be applied to distracted driving as well. Mrs. Rowley went on to say that better education is needed in schools and that parents and all adults need to be exemplary role models of good driving behaviors. She also wants there to be better police enforcement and increased penalties to minimize incidents of distracted driving. After her son's tragic, unnecessary, and untimely death, Mrs. Rowley and her family worked with State Delegate Scott Soroville of the Mount Vernon District in Northern Virginia to rally bipartisan support to pass a new law in July 2013 that made texting a primary offense. It's now punishable by a $125 fine for a first offense and $250 for each subsequent offense. It's important to note that handheld phone devices are still allowed in Virginia for drivers over the age of 18, which is something Mrs. Rowley wants to be changed. She went on to say that someone who drives while intoxicated or drunk is impaired, but someone who drives while texting is driving unsighted because there isn't any visual focus on the road, which can be as significant or worse than the impact of drunk driving. According to the National Transportation Safety Board, approximately 80% of all roadway accidents are believed to be caused by a distracted driver. Distracted driving doesn't only happen in cars. It can occur in boats, planes, trains, or other moving vehicles. Also, distracted behavior can happen while walking. There are numerous incidents of videos of someone having an accident while texting, including getting hit by cars. If you'd like to learn more about Mrs. Rowley's work or contact her for speaking engagements, please visit her website, joylifecoaching.net. If you'd like to learn more about AT&T's campaign against texting and driving, please visit the It Can Wait website at itcanwait.com. My featured guest last week was Bella Gandhi, who is an internationally recognized relationship expert who is a frequent guest on the Steve Harvey television show and is also the founder and president of the Smart Dating Academy. The Huffington Post describes her as the fairy godmother of dating. Mrs. Gandhi shared with us a story about a couple that she felt and told others should be together. These targets of her proposed matchmaking eventually dated and subsequently married. Afterwards, she knew that being a matchmaker was something that she needed to do as a career. These thoughts of creating a dating business continued to drive Mrs. Gandhi's entrepreneurial thoughts and spirit. Years later, she left her job as the vice president of housewares to pursue her dream and follow her passion instead of looking back with regrets about something that might have been and later asking herself, what if? During our conversation, we discussed a lot about pushing past the barriers individuals sometimes put on themselves while attempting to achieve success. Individuals must remember that even if the outcome isn't a success, there are always lessons to be learned by regrouping and continuing to move forward. In terms of dating, the Smart Dating Academy teaches individuals to become their own matchmakers. The Academy teaches individuals about the roadblocks created by their behaviors, identifies mental barriers, and helps to eliminate the things that are holding them back from being fully available. The Smart Dating Academy helps to rebuild individuals along with identifying things that lead to making solid connections by developing a personalized dating checklist, taking quality pictures, and assisting with writing dating profiles. The best way to describe the services that the staff at the Smart Dating Academy provide is a personal trainer for dating. Mrs. Gandhi said that a lot of individuals' bad dating habits stem from things that happened earlier in their life. Therefore, individuals tend to seek companionship based on past experiences and not necessarily something that's intellectually stimulating. She went on to say that if individuals want to find love, then they need to open their eyes. Her advice is to look around, stop being so critical, and try technology. Online options must be part of the dating plan. Additionally, we discuss ways to set up a good dating profile and things that shouldn't be included in one, along with the methods to capture the best profile photos. Unfortunately, I can't share these tips with you now, but if you'd like to obtain this information, you'll have to listen to the rest of our conversation. If anyone is interested in learning about the Smart Dating Academy, please visit its website at smartdatingacademy.com. If you missed our conversation, this interview is available on my website at slyoung.com/bjt-radio.html. To be successful, individuals must use determination, willpower, and perseverance to achieve their dreams. A lot of times, individuals become stifled due to fear, which can prevent them from pursuing success. It should also be noted that fear is an emotion, and individuals must learn to manage it. Don't be afraid to actively pursue your dreams so that there will be reduced possibilities of later asking yourself, what if? If you'd like to read my latest article on the HuffPost, What If?, visit my website at slyoung.com/what-if.html. On today's show, we'll discuss character and ethics. A couple of my articles about this topic are good reference points. The first is, Ethics Training is Missing the Mark. Here's why. The second article, Individual Character, it's still an important factor in success. I wrote about today's guest, Dr. London. These articles are available on the HuffPost and also on the blog on my website at slyoung.com/blog.html. If you'd like to connect with me after the show, you can reach me on my website, slyoung.com, on Facebook at facebook.com/beyondjusttalk, one word, or locate me on Twitter, Google+, Instagram, and SoundCloud using the handle SLYoungVA. Folks, we're just getting started today. There's still more to discuss about a man who is an exemplary leader, so stay tuned. As for the rest of today's show, we'll discuss the importance of having role models and character, share advice for overcoming failure of judgment one time versus many times, provide guidance for making tough decisions, discuss the importance of considering success beyond traditional measures, share information about the importance of persistence and having a positive attitude in success. Before I introduce today's guest, I want listeners to know that if you'd like to join our conversation, please dial 1-800-450-7876. My guest today, Dr. J. Phillip London, is the Executive Chairman and Chairman of the Board of CACI International Incorporated, a $3.7 billion information solutions and services company and Fortune 1000 company. Dr. London served as CACI's President and Chief Executive Officer for 23 years. He's also known as the founder of the modern-day CACI. During his tenure and under his leadership, he grew this company from a small professional services consulting firm to become an information technology and communication solutions strategic powerhouse across Northern America and Europe. As the executive chairman, he oversees strategic initiatives to maximize shareholder value, develop meaningful client relationships, further client goals and objectives, and monitors major financial transactions, including CACI's legacy mergers and acquisitions programs. He's one of CACI's public figures who maintains close relationships with customers and the federal IT sector. Dr. London has written several books. In 2008, His book, Our Good Name, was published to combat and refute an orchestrated campaign that erroneously and grossly distorted media reports about CACI's work in Iraq for the U.S. Army at Abu Ghraib prison. This book documents CACI's public struggle to overcome false allegations while at the same time supporting a nation at war. In 2013, he released Character, the Ultimate Success Factor, which emphasizes character as a representation of an individual's actions, attitude, commitment, and determination to uphold ethical principles despite any potential consequences. This book serves as a testament that personal integrity is much more important than any short-term financial or questionable gains. Now, without further ado, I welcome my guest who is an executive role model, a character-driven leader, an author, and the executive chairman and chairman of the board of CACI International, Incorporated, Dr. J. Phillip London. Welcome to Beyond Just Talk.
Sly, thank you very much. It's a delight and pleasure to be here. I couldn't help but reflect on how you started off talking about the dating situation. And I thought, character is an important consideration in that relationship as well.
Absolutely.
So it turns out that our notion of character, integrity, and focusing on doing the right thing applies in all parts of our life, including our social and relationship dimensions. So we've got a topic here that I think that will appeal broadly across interests of nearly all of your leaders, if not listeners, if not all of them.
Exactly. But before we start getting into our conversation today, the first question I always like to ask my guests is, who are they? So who is Dr. J. Phillip London?
Well, I'm your outline gave a little bit of my biographical background, but I'm a what you see is what you get kind of a person. I have committed my life to my professional and family activities. I have developed a notion of and viewpoint about the importance of character and integrity, and it's something that's actually developed over a period of many years, Sly. Mm-hmm. It isn't something that was one of these situations where just a light switch went on. And I've realized the importance of it. I see it, the importance of character and integrity and doing the right thing widely throughout our community and our social structure. I see it in our government. I see it in our business enterprises. I see it in our sports programs. You see all kinds of examples, and perhaps we'll get into some of those as we go through this morning. But we've got a topic here that's red hot. I am committed to continuing to communicate it. I think we have what amounts to a growing crisis with regard to character and integrity, and more instances are causing difficulties in our society and our economy and otherwise, including fraud and other kinds of really serious crime that basically reflects on the inability of people to make the right decisions. And I think it all weaves its way back into the character issue.
Right. And I mean, I think that's a great setup, because one of the things I want to remind folks is that earlier this year, we actually met for the first time when I interviewed you for an article that I wrote for my blog on the Huffington Post, which is that individual character, it's still an important factor in success. And during that conversation, I mean, it was so enlightening. We shared so many different views about character and life and some of our experiences that I was like, once I got this show, I was like, I've got to have you on to share this with a broader audience.
Well, the idea of sharing these values, I thought, was quite a touching point, and I reflected and enjoyed that experience as well. I hope we can amplify it and carry it on today.
Yeah, definitely, and we'll pick up that conversation right after the break.
1450 WOL.
Good morning. It's WOL Traffic Update is brought to you by arcadeck.com. Northbound on 295 was the accident after Benning Road before Burroughs Avenue, still slowing things down from the 11th Street Bridge. Southbound on 295, you're slowing from Benning Road to East Capitol Street. Construction northbound on 210 after Palmer Road before the Beltway has the right lane closed in a bit of a backup there. If you can dream it, Arcadeck can build it, and with only exceptional building products like AZEK and TimberTech, the backyard of your dreams is only a call away. Go to arcadeck.com for your free design guide. That's arcadeck.com. Now your WOL weather forecast brought to you by the Foundation for a Better Life. For today, clouds and then thunderstorms later, a high near 80. Thunderstorms overnight down to 70. Tomorrow, early showers and a high near 76. Winston Churchill's words stirred his country in the face of defeat. Today they inspire us to reach for our own victories, commitment. Pass it on from the Foundation for a Better Life at values.com. Steve Hirschhorn for News Talk 1450 WOL, where information is power.
1450 WOL.
All right, folks, welcome back. You're listening to Beyond Just Talk with S.L. Young, and my guest today is Dr. J. Phillip London, the Executive Chairman and Chairman of the Board of CACI International Incorporated. So prior to the break, we were just starting to get warmed up and learning a little bit about Dr. London, and so Dr. London was starting to tell us a little bit about himself. So as we continue on in our conversation, why is it important for individuals to learn early and practice throughout their lives the line from William Ernest Henley's poem, Invictus, I am the master of my fate, I am the captain of my soul?
Fabulous line. My father recited poems throughout his life, and I must have heard this one 300 or 400 times. There's no way that can have, in my personal opinion, a life that you can be proud of and feel that you've been successful, and unless you take care of yourself and take your own accountability. Mm-hmm. That's a big theme in my book. It's a theme that we've been active in promoting. There's just no simple way to get around the idea that you have to be accountable for yourself. And certainly Henley's poem reflected that. He wrote that, by the way, in 1870. Wow. So that thought's been around a long time.
Well, it's something that's very important. Yeah. And I know when I read your book, that was one of the things that I think was in the first part of the early chapters that really resonated with me. And I said, this is going to be a book that's really, really meaningful. And as I read through the rest of the book, I was like, man, this is a really good book that should be assigned to college students to read, or anybody who's in business, because you give such wonderful examples about how to manage yourself properly. So you had some great role models who helped shape your core beliefs. So what advice do you offer to someone who doesn't have or can't find a good role model?
That's a terrific question, Sly. I think there are role models all around us. The fact that you may not be in a situation to have one in a personal relationship doesn't mean that you can't look to the world around you, some of the great leaders of our country, of our religious faiths and backgrounds, from academic institutions. I'd like to flip back to the idea that one of my role models that I will never have an opportunity to know, and that was George Washington, of all the great leadership and commitments and conviction, and how he spent his life and dedicated his life to doing the right thing and supporting the creation of our country. So there's one role model that if you get into it a little bit, I think could serve almost anyone. And there are many others, and they don't have to be somebody that you live with or know or be a part of in some sort of organization. But look around. Try to identify people that you respect, and they can be your role models, people that you've observed and how they've conducted their life. I read a book one time by John Fitzgerald Kennedy, Profiles in Courage. It's about a number of individuals in government that had taken a stand based on character and their belief in doing the right thing, and had suffered significant individual and personal consequences. I still have that book. It's signed by President Kennedy. My mother got it from him back in 1962, just after he was elected. It's signed by him. And I've kept that in my duffel bag as I've gone around in my Navy days, with the idea that there are role models. You may not know them personally, but if you'll think about how they behaved, and just the idea of not letting the important people in your life down is another one, whether it's your family, your parents, your teachers, or other leaders. I've reflected in that direction as well. I don't want to let people down that have trusted me and put their faith in me and put confidence in me.
Yeah, I think that's important to be able to identify those role models, because there aren't necessarily these very, very strong role models that exist out in our environment. And sometimes they can be a little bit challenging. And we've seen lots of incidents recently of folks that are a little bit void in character and ethics and integrity. So how can or does an individual independently develop character?
Well, in my case, I'll speak my own personal experience. It started with my life experience with my family and my mother. Were people of faith and believed in doing the right thing. I was raised in Oklahoma. They were pioneers. Their people had come into that part of the world in the late 1800s and early 1900s. There was a big notion of self-reliant. We had to take care of ourselves, so nobody going to take care of for us. So you developed an accountability and responsibility, and it was based on the idea that I've got to help myself first. Mm-hmm. And this has been a part, and I've evolved that philosophy, if you will, or lifestyle throughout my life, and recognized over a period of time the importance of it. Certainly found that out in business. One of the defining moments in my career was when I was appointed the Chief Executive Officer of CACI International, and began to realize accountability was me. I was going to be the responsible person legally a public corporation for getting the things done right and making sure that we complied with all the laws and regulations. And so it became almost a cause that I supported, realizing that by doing these things and doing things the right way really enhances your business opportunities. It was having great character doesn't make you necessarily a success in business, because you can make a lot of dumb business decisions.
Right.
But you really can't get, I don't think, to creating a large, significant, successful organization unless people believe in what they're doing and are committed to doing their best and complying with the rules and regulations and getting things done and accomplished.
Yeah, and one of the things that I want to go back to that you said is about individual responsibility and the responsibility of individuals to know that it's on them to do the right thing, because others could tell you to do the right thing, but you've got to be willing to sometimes go out on a limb and do the right things when others aren't.
I think you find that is a problem that's been arising, emerging more and more so in our society and our culture and our government institutions. And as a matter of fact, business has, and the Wall Street world that we've seen over the last couple of decades has had some significant problems in that area. Bernie Madoff, the guy with the Ponzi scheme guy that bilked all the money from his many investors, the Enron situation, WorldCom. You've had a number of these examples where people have really not fulfilled their obligations and responsibilities. And what for the life of me, I can't understand how they think they're going to get away with these things.
Right.
That's on a kind of a common street level. Understand, how do you think you're going to get away with this stuff? But that doesn't speak to the notion of why you should have a viewpoint of integrity in the first place.
Right.
And that is, in my opinion, is even more important.
But I think one of the other challenges is, and folks don't necessarily want to address or tie ethics with workplace bullying, because sometimes folks are bullied into compliance or submission, and they go along with things that they see that are actually happening in the workplace. So how do you overcome that when you have someone who's such a powerful leader that is doing bad things and you want to do the right thing?
That's a terrible moral dilemma to find yourself in.
I know.
And I lament the fact that I think in our society, in our business and organizational situations, there are more and more people that are that are exposed to this kind of pressure. I have a couple of thoughts on that. I've thought a lot about it. In the organizations, the government, and like in our company, we do have hotlines. We do have whistleblower protections. So there is a way. Now, that takes a certain amount of integrity, a certain fortitude for people just to pick up a phone and try the anonymous hotline to the ombudsman. But I would urge people to pursue that as one thing. And then the final thing, Sly, quite frankly, is if you don't feel like you're in an organization that comports with what you believe is the right thing to do, and we're not talking about perfection here. People make mistakes,
right?
Unconsciously sometimes, and by just pure mistakes. But if you find yourself in a situation that's incompatible with your beliefs, I think you've just got to simply walk, and that takes a lot of fortitude. Sometimes you're concerned about your economic welfare, your family, and so on. But I think it's a never-ending spiral when you get down to the compliance and being pressured into doing the wrong things or breaking the law, for goodness sake. Because as I was saying earlier, those things are going to come out.
Right.
And you're going to get caught eventually. So it's a no-win situation once you start down that road.
Exactly. And I think these are some of the points that we really connected on, because when I was asking to interview you originally, I had sent you over some of the articles that I had written based on some of my experiences working with folks who were unethical and doing questionable things. And I actually left several organizations because individuals were refusing to do the right thing. And I ultimately am responsible for the choices that I make. And, it's sort of interesting because sometimes you have leaders that are out there that say, well, I'm very ethical. But then when you put them in a position when they have to make a decision whether it has a personal impact to them, then their considerations aren't necessarily the same.
They shift
because one of the things that I always like to say, and I've thought a lot about this myself because I write about belief. And belief is defined, in my eyes, in three ways. It's a concept, something that we generally believe in. It's a consideration, something that might be true for me. But most times where individuals make decisions are inconvenience. And being able to step out of those uncomfortable moments and still do the right thing when it might not be convenient, that's the tough thing to do sometimes. But it's always the right thing.
It is indeed. I just want to add one little anecdote to it, and that is I've seen in situations where the right thing viewed by one party is not the right thing viewed by another.
Exactly. Yep.
So there is that gray area. But the one thing I would point out at this point is, at this juncture, Character is an attribute we can all own. Good character we can all own. And it's an attribute that no one can ever take from you,
right,
no matter what the consequences.
Right. And I think that's an important thing to remember. So was there a defining moment in your personal or business life that made you realize the importance of your character from an accountability and responsibility perspective?
Well, actually, there's been several of them, but one of them that I will focus on is experiences that's more recent in my life, actually, was the Abu Ghraib situation that you mentioned before. I soon realized that we were being accused for all kinds of things that were just completely over the top. I did have an internal investigation. I was satisfied that we were not culpable anywhere close to the extent that had been alleged against us. And I realized that I was going to have to stand up. There was a lot of pressure from the media, enormous pressure from the media, and even internal to the company to do some dramatic actions, fire a bunch of people, make some statements, and so on. I didn't feel that I didn't want to castigate anyone or fire anybody that had not done things wrong. This is just not the right thing to do. So I had a difficult time there, but I finally realized that I was going to stand up and do the right thing, frankly. And here's what was the key, Sly. Regardless of what was going to happen to me, I had to realize that I was going to stand up. This is like going back to John Kennedy's book about profiles in courage. Mm-hmm. Even if it was going to take me down, I was going to stand up and do the right thing because that's what had to be done in this case. There was too many people involved. It was a public corporation. I had Army clients involved. We had a whole raft of very innocent people. So I took myself out of the equation, frankly. And that was a big learning and defining experience for me.
You know, I wish I would have worked with more leaders like you that actually acted and behaved the way that they talk about it within an organization, because it makes all the difference when your leaders within the organization not only espouse these values, but actually demonstrate it day in and day out. And individuals within the organization say, I know that I can raise my hand and say something is not right here and there won't be any consequences because this is what the organization believes, which I think is critically important.
It's actually a big deal.
It's a very big deal.
It's a big deal.
And we've got about maybe 30 seconds before we go to break here. So we could start this, but why is individual accountability and responsibility a key element of living a purposeful life, especially as it relates to someone's character?
I got to be able to look in the mirror every time I go home at night. And if I look in there and I have to turn my head because I've done something that I'm not proud of, then I know I'm on the wrong track and I got to get back on the right track.
Well, I think that's a great place to leave it, and we'll pick this conversation up right after the break.
News Talk 1450 WOL AM, where information is power.
Good morning, I'm Mike Fortier. Here's the latest from News1.com, brought to you in part by Cambria Hotels and Suites. Book your next stay at Cambria Hotels and Suites, now open in downtown D.C. and Rockville. Their modern, stylish rooms make you feel like you've been upgraded. Book now at CambriaHotelsandSuites.com. A child dies after falling from a balcony in Montgomery County. 2-year-old Legend White falls from the balcony of a third-floor apartment last week in Aspen Hill on Hewitt Avenue. It's estimated the boy fell 40 feet after slipping through the rails. He's airlifted to a hospital where he dies Sunday. It looks like the use of police body cameras in Montgomery County might be off to a good start. Footage from a police officer's body camera used for the first time this summer to settle a disorderly persons case. Under a pilot program, 152 body cameras now being used by officers. D.C. firefighters seem to be on board with a plan to use private ambulances. Mayor Muriel Bowser wants a third-party provider to take patients with minor injuries to the hospital. The hope is this would free firefighters to get more EMS training and fix the department's cars and trucks. Fairfax County Police Chief Edwin Rossler says an officer who tased a man in his custody acted properly.
The officer knows he has a folding knife in his right front pocket, and the officer cannot see Mr. Kanzler's hands. And it's at that moment that you see on the video that the officer deployed the taser to control Mr. Kanzler.
There were initial concerns excessive force was used in the arrest of Elton Kanzler last Thursday afternoon in Alexandria. Rossler says Kanzler later resisted arrest, assaulted the officer, and might have tried to reach for a knife. 1 man dead and 3 others hurt in separate shootings in D.C. The deadly shooting happening last night on Eaton Road southeast near the Anacostia metro station. Another man who was shot survives. Less than 3 hours later, 2 other men are shot in southeast at 46th and G Streets. Both those victims survive. This report brought to you in part by the American Association for Cancer Research. The American Association for Cancer Research, finding cures together. Please support cancer research by donating today at www.aacrfoundation.org.
All right, folks, welcome back to Beyond Just Talk with S.L. Young. Today, my guest is Dr. J. Phillip London, who is the executive chairman and chairman of the board of CACI International. And we've been having a great conversation about ethics, integrity, and the importance of leadership. And leadership is not just what happens within the organization, but leadership begins with the decisions that you make as an individual. So prior to the break, we were starting to talk about why is individual accountability and responsibility a key element of living a purposeful life, especially as it relates to someone's character. And prior to the break, Dr. London, you said an individual has to look at themselves in the mirror and say, I'm okay with these decisions.
I think that if you start with yourself and set a course of action and work on it, it's a journey, isn't it?
Yeah.
You go along and you realize you make some mistakes, and the idea of correcting and self-correcting, I think, is very important. I think that the whole idea we were talking about previously about role models, and the whole idea that I've had in my lifetime is that I've been surrounded, fortunately, by a lot of fine, wonderful people, role models, mentors, parents, teachers, a wonderful wife, wonderful family, children. I don't want to let them down. Mm-hmm. I don't want to let them down. I don't want to behave in any fashion that would ever bring shame to the family or to me. Now, that doesn't mean we're perfect. People make mistakes. Sometimes you make mistakes and you're surprised at how it turns out on you. But there's a difference between making willful mistakes or taking actions that are willful and intended to deviate from doing the right thing, and those that are accidental. I want to set my goals to, frankly, live up to the best that I can possibly do and represent my family and those that have trusted me over the period of time in my life.
Well, I think that's a great segue into this question. So how do you help someone move forward after a failure of judgment, as a mistake at a moment in time isn't always indicative of future behavior?
Well, we all make mistakes is where you start on that one.
Right.
And so it's recognizing that none of us are perfect. We're going to have to learn. I think the big thing is learning. Mm-hmm. Once you make a mistake, let's reflect. Step back. What would I have done different? How could I have gained more information? How could I have gotten better advice? What should I thought was my goal at the end of the day on this issue? So there's ways you can do an analysis and determine how to improve yourself. But I think the idea of keeping that role out, that standard out there of not wanting to disappoint my friends, my colleagues and peers, but also not wanting to disappoint myself.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting, I think, when you start to describe that just a little bit, because one of the books that I read earlier in my career, and I just happened to come across it by happenstance, and it's Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And it was a very important and significant book for me because in the book, one of the major themes in the book was about choice. Choice, individual behavior, we always have the option of choice. Sometimes others might have control over the things that we do, but when we're not in a situation that we're fearful of our life or something else, we have the power of choice. So choice is an important factor in character development as well. So what advice do you have for individuals who are faced with a tough decision that hovers around the line of ethical versus unethical behavior?
Consequences is where you start. Mm-hmm. What are the consequences of my decisions one way or the other? How do I want to see, in looking in the mirror, how do I want to see the consequences of the decisions? The other thing in approaching decisions like this, because quite frankly, Sly, there is often a vast arena of gray, an area of gray here. So I think gathering advice, perhaps talking with colleagues, getting information from or ideas from other parties is always useful. Mm-hmm. And then pulling together what you believe is a course of action that you will be able to sustain the consequences. And frankly, it's always back to this idea, will I be proud of what I've done? One of the things that I promote in our company is the concept of character, values, and pride. Character, values, and pride. We want to have a set of values we share. We understand the importance of character, but we want to be, at the end of the day, proud of what we've done, proud of how we represented ourselves in our work and our behavior and our relationships with our colleagues and our customers and our clients and our shareholders. So characters, values, and pride is a big driver in what we're trying to accomplish at CACI.
Well, it's interesting because there are a couple of things that you said that I really want to go back to, because you talk about, when I ask you the question, you just said simply consequences. And I really want to expand on that a little bit, because consequences are important, not just personally, but organizationally and socially as well. And so I liked how you sort of defined it within your organization of character, values, and pride. But I also like the question that that reflective question that you put out there is, will I be proud of the things that I've done? And I think if a lot of us stop and think about the things that we're about to do and ask that reflective question, then we might not do those things. And that's something that I address in my recent article, What If? So folks, if you have an opportunity to go out and read that. No, take an opportunity to go out and read it, because it's an important question about what if, because we're all faced with what if questions all the time. But this article might change your feelings and thoughts about it. So if you want to read that article, go out to slyoung.com/what-if.html. Dr. London, what should an individual do if their employer's organization doesn't have an organizational culture based on principles and character?
Well, I would think that's an opportunity to weave these ideas, to promote these ideas, to bring these ideas into your organization. If it doesn't have a culture focus that you are proud of or believe is in the something that you want to be affiliated with, then you have an opportunity. You have an opportunity to bring some of these ideas and share them with your colleagues, perhaps mention them with your supervisor, perhaps promote them inside. The other side of that coin is, if there's no interest there and there's pushback,
yep,
then you've got this other issue of, well, do I want to stick around?
Exactly.
So, but that's I like to think in terms of opportunity, Sly.
Well,
and if it doesn't exist there, let's create one. Let's create a culture of integrity and goodwill and good relationships, and all. We could all be proud of it.
Yeah, well, I like to think that the grass is greener on the other side as well, and that folks are going to be willing to come along with us. But unfortunately, when you sort of bring out that I want to have an ethical culture, and you're in a culture that isn't necessarily ethical, might not be the right environment. But
that's a tough call.
It is. So are there ever any acceptable times that someone should compromise on their character?
That's a terrific question. I've had it before. I would say that there's always a right of self-defense. Mm-hmm. In terms of life physically protecting their life. Even there are exceptions, though, in terms of military stress, interrogation issues where you might want to not divulge something and forfeit your life. Mm-hmm. That's done and it is done. But that's the only situation that I have ever seriously considered as an exception in a compromising situation, because you have to have this as part of your core.
Right.
The idea of doing the right thing, Sly, is not something, it's a switch, a light switch. We're going to do some of it today and we're not going to do some of it tomorrow. It is either part of your personality and your belief system or it isn't. But I do recognize there are situations. In fact, I have several friends that were prisoners in the Hanoi Hilton back in the Vietnam era, and very, very close friends. Mm-hmm. And if there's anybody that knows what character's about, integrity, and doing the right thing and trying to comport and relate to their colleagues in that god-awful situation, it's those folks. Right. And their idea of a return with honor, they realize that under torturing situations they were going to have to acquiesce in certain ways to preserve their life and or their capability to prevail. Mm-hmm. But the return with honor was a slogan that they had and provided them a way to preserve their self-dignity, their respect for themselves, and ultimately their character. And most of them have had wonderful careers after that experience, interesting enough.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I want to actually back up for just a moment, because there was something that you said again that I want to sort of highlight. And you said that character isn't something that's a switch that you turn on and off. And I don't think that we do enough to develop character and ethical leadership and teaching individuals that it's okay to stand up against the crowd when things aren't going the right way. I think we need to do more of that. But the other thing that I wanted to add to that is that it can't be conditional as well, because sometimes folks will say, I am very ethical, but then a circumstance will come up and then they do the total opposite of what they said they wouldn't do. So we can't have it, both ways. Either you're ethical or you're not. Because one of the things that I like to teach my students and the guys in the jail that I work with as well is that if you have an ethical starting point, so here's the line, Here's ethical, here's unethical. When you start to shift that line just a little bit, what you've now done is shifted your starting point for what you believe is ethical or unethical. And once you start adjusting that line, then you say, well, this time it's not as bad.
Right.
The consequences weren't that bad. So now I'm going to do a little bit more and be a little bit more unethical. And so once you start moving that line, it's a dangerous proposition.
It's the old slippery slope idea that we talk about so often. Once you get taste a little bit of it, then you think, well, a little bit more won't hurt either. And, of course, that is a fatal strategy. A lot of these things, Sly, we're talking about have to do with how we live our lives. Mm-hmm. They have a spiritual aspect, not necessarily religious in that sense, but a spiritual dimension of how we believe in ourselves, the quality that we want to have in our lifetime, and how we want to feel about ourselves at the end of the day. At least to me, that's extremely important. Maybe it's something I've garnered as I've gone through life, and as I've grown a little older, have a greater appreciation for these values and see how they affect our society and our culture. Mm-hmm. And it's one of the things that I've tried to do in a leadership role is to promote these ideas. This is not my day job, but it's something that I've committed to doing in my life, to share these notions and try to create a better understanding and appreciation for character and value and how we live and comport ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, I just love everything that you're saying, because I think these are conversations that more individuals need to hear on a regular basis to make sure that they're getting the right direction, because there's so many negative influences that are out there today, and folks are willing to try to achieve success by any means necessary. And that type of culture is going to lead us to a very negative culture that a lot of folks are going to be negatively affected by that. So we really need to have more considerations about that. So one of the things that I want to talk to you about after the break is about success, and success as it relates to ethics and character and things that we continue to do to move forward every day. I think we'll go out to the break and we'll pick this up on the other side.
1450 WOL.
Good morning. This WOL traffic update is brought to you by TrueCar. Around the Beltway, we're doing pretty well right now. 295 is looking pretty good. DC 295, the earlier accident near Burroughs Avenue northbound cleared away. No more delays there. Southbound, we're in good shape. Also, New York Avenue, northeast and northwest, nor inbound and outbound. Also a smooth ride right now. And no problems on Rhode Island Avenue as your alternate. TrueCar is the fun way to buy a new car and make sure you never overpay. TrueCar users save an average of over $3,000 off MSRP. Save time, save money, never overpay. Download the TrueCar app today. Now your WOL weather forecast brought to you by Food Lion. For today, cloudy. Could see a thunderstorm this afternoon, a high around 80 degrees. Early showers tomorrow and a high near 76. Now through October 6th, buy a specially marked bag of apples at Food Lion, and Food Lion Feeds will donate meals to local food banks. Learn more at foodlion.com/feeds. Steve Hirschhorn for News Talk 1450 WOL, where information is power.
This is Morgan Freeman. Colorectal cancer is the second leading cancer killer of men and women over 50. Doesn't always cause symptoms, but it can be prevented. Get screened.
A message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
1450 WOL.
All right, folks, welcome back. Man, I can't believe that we're already in the final segment. I would love to sit here and talk to Dr. J. Phillip London, CACI's Executive Chairman and Chairman of the Board, for a lot longer. But unfortunately, we're running out of time, so we've got to figure out what do we do in the remaining moments, but I've got plenty of plans. But folks, I want you to know that if you want to read his book that was released in 2013, it's called Character, The Ultimate Success Factor, which emphasizes character as a representation of an individual's actions, attitude, commitment, and determination to uphold ethical principles despite any potential consequences. So prior to the break, I was starting to transition into success, because sometimes individuals will say, you know what, I'm going to be successful, and I'm going to be successful whatever it takes. I don't care who I step on, who I hurt, as long as I achieve my objectives. So that's something that, we don't want to have that type of attitude. And success is often marked by the achievement of specific milestones. So, question for you, Dr. London, why should someone consider their state of mind as it applies to success?
Always an interesting and challenging issue, Sly. What I've discovered in my experience is that success doesn't necessarily relate to wealth, power, fame, notoriety, and that sort of thing. Those are all certainly worthy. There's nothing wrong with being a wealthy person or a powerful person or influential, but it isn't, in my opinion, the only criteria or standard by which you should judge your life or your success in life. I think that, for one thing, I define character, and my view of character is it's how you deal with people, how you behave, how you appreciate people that have worked with you and gone with you, and how you've focused on doing the right things and trying to demonstrate integrity. Success, on the other hand, doesn't have to relate to wealth and all the rest. It can be more focused on how you live your life, how you reflect on the at the end of the day. Again, I'm a big on the end of the day on how I feel like I've carried out my activities. Have I done things that I think represent what I believe is good, valuable, and I certainly would never support the idea of walking on people. One of the thoughts you had, to me, that's an unacceptable dimension of what I think is a successful career in life. We have to treat people. I don't think we have to necessarily mollycoddle people, but we have to expect them to do their job, to be accountable. But I think the idea of a willful focus on walking over people if I have to, cutting corners if I have to me, simply, Sly, is unacceptable. I mean, I reject that whole thesis of how to behave.
Yeah, and what folks have to remember is that short-term gains can still have long-term consequences. So you really need to think about your actions and the things that you're doing and what impact it might have. And there appears to be a growing number of individuals and organizations with the win-at-any-cost mentality. What can be done to change this trend?
Well, I think we're trying right now to set some kind of new standard to promote the idea that our society and our culture will be better served ultimately as a people when we have mutual respect and dignity and behave with a respectful decorum. I think you see a lot of fragmentation now in our government situation. You see a lot of things going haywire in the military, the sexual abuse problems. You see the problems with the General Motors and its mechanical problems. Volkswagen is out here just the other day with problems they've got. Not too long ago, you were reading about problems with the soccer fraud in the associations, the management association with soccer. So you see these all over the place. To me, Sly, these are really, really negative trend lines and have got to be reversed. And I think we simply start talking about it. We focus on it. We try to get attention on the issue and communicate that this behavior is unacceptable, that the standards has got to be raised. And I think it's like so many things in this world. You start with you. You start with me. You start with Sly. You start with Jack. And we gain momentum. We talk with our colleagues and try to promote the idea that this is an issue that's got to be addressed and improved.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you brought up the recent scandal related to VW, and I just want to throw some questions out to you about it, not getting necessarily specific into what they're doing in terms of leadership, but generally speaking. So the recent scandal at VW related to the alleged emissions reporting falsifications, if true, is extremely bad for many different reasons. So if something similar happened during your tenure as CEO at CACI, how would you have handled this type of situation?
I've got it down at this point. There is no cover-up compromise. One of the things that I had the experience of Abu Ghraib was reflecting back on the Johnson & Johnson Tylenol problems back in the early 80s. You may remember the poison capsules. Yep. 7 people in the Chicago area died. Johnson & Johnson is a real role model in standing up. They went public on their problem. They stated that their objective was to protect their patients. Their objective was to make sure that they were in full compliance with the authorities, the law and legal authorities and the law enforcement and so on to get the right thing done. Of course, if you go to a drugstore today and you pick up a bottle of any kind of a medication, you've got a safety wrappers on them. All that came about from Johnson & Johnson. We're all better for it. So I think that there are role models, and the way I behaved at CACI and Abu Ghraib reflected the Johnson & Johnson situation. I was going to stand up, do the right thing, and quite frankly was intent on doing the right thing, frankly, no matter what the consequences may or may not have been for me myself. I learned that technique from a Navy admiral, Admiral Thomas Moore. Was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs during the Nixon and Vietnam situation. And one of the things that Tom shared with me, he served on our board for a number of years. He was a former CNO also. But he said, Jack, there are times when you have to take yourself out of the equation. You have to set yourself aside. You have to do what's the right thing. You do the right thing and not focus on the consequences for yourself. So those are really good elements of behavior, how to set your standards. Again, from a role model, in this case, Admiral Thomas Moore.
So if these incidents are true, what's alleged that's happened at VW, what are the biggest factors related to restoring confidence in the company?
Management has to wipe the slate clean. And first of all, knowledge where appropriate and where the details are known and so on, as to simply declare their intent to fix their problem, clean their problem up, acknowledge their problem, I think is a big deal. Mm-hmm. You see a lot of people, organizations trying to dodge accountability. Again, accountability and responsibility we talked about earlier. Mm-hmm. So I think the first thing is to acknowledge the issue and then set a course of action, go public on what you're going to do to ameliorate the situation, correct the situation, be specific, go out, publicize it. And let the world know that you're going to turn the situation around and you're going to take certain steps, and you've got to be specific about those steps and articulate them and then live up to them and then report back on them as you progress and go along. There are ways to turn organizations around. It takes determination. It takes leadership.
Okay, so just a quick question, but we're real quickly running out of time, but I want to ask you this. Do you think getting rid of a CEO does anything more than window dressing?
Well, of course, it depends on the situation.
Yeah,
there are times when getting rid of the CEO is exactly the right thing to do. So.
Right. so we'll leave it there because I want to talk about your book for a moment. So sure. In your book, Character, The Ultimate Success Factor, you write, achievement can be defined in terms of wealth, power, or fame, and you alluded to part of this earlier. Likewise, it can be defined in terms of social welfare and individual fulfillment. And when I read that really resonated with me in terms of the work that I'm doing now. So why is it important to consider success beyond traditional measurements?
Quite frankly, our society is put together and knitted together on trust. And part of trust is doing the right thing, and part of doing the right thing has to do with people and our social system and our environment. If you discard that, or if you ignore that aspect of your behavior in an organization as a leader, then you really are shortchanging the future of our country. There has to be this notion of a community, that we are a people, that we, not necessarily that we're our brother's keeper, but we have to be mindful of those in our environment, perhaps, that need help. Mm-hmm. And so there are consequences. And leaders have to, in my opinion, weigh these considerations and take them into view as they go along. It's maybe not the driving factor, but it has to be a part of the considerations.
And one question that I want to make sure I get in real quick before we run out of time. Yep. If someone has had character missteps, what can an individual do to turn things around?
They have to, first, again, it's back to where I was before, acknowledge the mistake. If you can't acknowledge mistake, you don't have a chance to straighten yourself out. So that's the first and most important ingredient of all, is acknowledge it and then try to learn from it.
Okay. And then what about from an organization, same things?
Very similar. It is more difficult to achieve as an organization because you have to communicate. But the key to communication in terms of leadership and organization is repetition. You have to repeat the idea over and over and over in different ways.
And you just can't give it lip service. You've got to actually implement.
It has to be real.
Exactly. So, first and foremost, it has been a pleasure to not only talk to you today, but to talk to you in March of this year when I interviewed you for the article that I wrote about ethics. And I have learned so much from you, and I know that my audience has learned a lot from you as well. So thank you very much for your time, your effort, and your work in this area. And I hope that more individuals out there have leaders like you that are committed to ethical leadership, integrity, and being role models that others want to follow on many different levels. So, folks, I hope that you enjoyed today's show. On next week's show, my guest will be Dr. Patricia Harnett, who is the Chief Executive Officer at the Ethics and Compliance Initiative. Remember, your candle is fueled from within, so don't let anyone reduce or block the fuel to maximize its brightness. Enjoy the rest of your week. Until next time, my friends, have a good one.